That's nothing about eating Jews. That was just a terrible segue.
No, that was an awful segue.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
first time since 1996 they made rulings in July, and they're gonna have more. Like
Yeah,
they're like
usually like around my birthday, June 28th, that's like their final rulings are happening the 28th and 29th and 27th and
right,
so forth.
right, but there were so many. They heard so many cases in May that they had to actually extend out, which you don't hear of often. Like completely, sort of out of the norm for them. I mean, since 1996 anyway. So they did have a pretty big week. One of these happened last Tuesday,
Okay.
moments before our show. So we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I felt that it was important. So we're going to spend a very brief amount of time on it.
Okay.
But last Tuesday, the Supreme Court endorsed Montana tax credits that helped pay students to attend religious schools, with Chief Justice Roberts saying a state need not subsidize private education, but once a state decides to do so, it cannot disqualify some private schools solely because they are religious.
So that opens possibility for school choice to become more prevalent, or
Or,
for states to stop subsidizing private education completely, which I know people are going to get mad at me. And this is not an official Jorgensen Cohen campaign platform. That would be my preferred outcome, and here's why. When you open the door to state subsidized charter schooling, here's what happens. You now have the state becoming the main payer, the main consumer of education in private and charter schools. They're the ones paying the bill. And if they become the ones paying the bill, now they have to do it the way that the state says to. So very quickly, these charter schools become private in name only. Their customer is the government. They might have a handful of people who, who are paying out of pocket, but the vast majority of their customers are public education kids who can't on their own afford to pay for it. And so what happens with that? And the reason they can't afford to pay for it is because their parents have been robbed through the property taxes and all the other taxes to pay for their public education. So it's all a shell game. But what it leads to is the state controlling all forms of education. And eventually they're going to make it against the law to have private education that isn't paid for by the state. Now all of a sudden it's all just public education. It's all just government-run education. And they control how that education is doled out. And then eventually, the one good thing that would still exist is that, it's not the teachers unions aren't involved, and the schools can be shut down if they aren't performing well, and the teachers can be fired if they aren't performing well. Once they're getting that money and once they're being told what to do, then the schools say, hey, wait a second, you shouldn't be able to shut us down or fire our teachers. And now we've just got government schools
everywhere.
that are called something else, and you have destroyed private education. And the next step is going after homeschoolers. And for those who are thinking that I'm looking really far ahead and making a lot of assumptions, I invite you to look at everything the government has ever touched ever. They start with saying, we're going to help increase access by allowing people who can't afford it, and they can't afford it because we took their money, and we're going to make people who can't afford it be able to have access to these things that we need. And then they say, well, because we're controlling who has access and bringing these customers to these providers, we're going to tell them how to do their job. And then they say, well, since we're telling them how to do their job, we're going to make sure that they don't fail and that they never go under. And then one day they make it illegal for anyone to do it outside of this arrangement. And then they take over as complete. So kind of scary, but we will see how this ends up ending. And then there was another thing. So yesterday, in a rare unanimous vote, the Supreme Court ruled that members of the Electoral College have to vote for whomever won the popular vote in their respective states. And states are free to remove and punish presidential electors who speak with their pledges to support designated candidates, thereby essentially destroying the entire purpose of the Electoral College in the first place. Matt?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. I mean, the Electoral College has been a rubber stamp since the second election.
Oh yeah, of course.
So, yeah, it was the original purpose was if they disagreed with what the voter said, they could do this. But the other purpose of the Electoral College was to make sure that large population areas weren't dictating all of the country.
Right, right. Well, and it was also that the idea was that this was a collection of 50 nation states who were in a federation with each other in a federalist system, but that they, as individual states, chose who they wanted to be president. And it was, there was weighting based on population, how many votes they got. But it was not, it wasn't just, oh, we as an entire country pick this person. It's we as a collection of 50 states each select this person. So, this gets rid of the faithless elector and just has it where, the immediate, whoever wins their popular vote in their state gets the points.
Right. And this all stemmed from a case out of Washington where they fined several electors $1,000 for attempting to place their votes for someone other than Hillary Clinton. Which I get it.
I get it.
I get it.
I get it. R.I.P. to those electors, by the way.
Right. Justice Kagan wrote the opinion, and everybody but one signed on to it. And in it, she wrote, the Constitution's text and the nation's history both support allowing a state to enforce an elector's pledge to support his party's nominee and the state voter's choice for president. And I kind of understand this ruling. The state party is selecting these people to be a member of the Electoral College, to be an electorate for your state. It's supposed to be an honor, and your party picks you and says, hey, we want you to do this. They don't want you to change your mind. The reason you are being given that nowadays, maybe not originally, is because it's an honor. And they don't want somebody going rogue. But
like Catherine Bernard did in Georgia.
Right. Did she?
Yeah. That was her first, real exposure in politics in Georgia. She was the faithless Ron Paul elector. And
I thought that was somebody from Texas that did that.
No, she wanted to do it, and they basically did everything they could to block her. Yeah, that was her whole thing. Yeah,
somebody in Texas did do that in 16.
Yeah. So this didn't say that the states. Oh wait, no. This said that the states actually that they have to do it. They can't decide for themselves. They have to force the electors to vote for whoever won the popular vote
of their state.
Of their state. Okay.
Which I talked about later, but we'll just get into it now. But the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact should be crushed by this.
Well, it should be crushed by the fact that it's an interstate compact, which the Constitution explicitly says is not to be allowed.
It's a compact, not a treaty. I read all the arguments.
Yeah. But it's
a compact, not a treaty.
It's an agreement between states outside of the federal government.
Agreed. But no matter what, I think that's why they kind of made this ruling.
Oh.
To say, no, like, just so we don't have to hear that case, yes, you have to vote for who wins the popular vote.
In your state?
In your state. Instead of the popular vote overall. I think that I don't know. I haven't spoken with anybody on the Supreme Court recently or ever.
So you didn't do your job for the notes. You didn't contact the source for your show notes is what you're saying.
I did not know. I went to their reasonings and I read all of them and I did not get through.
You didn't ask them what they meant.
Right. Yeah. I did not ask them why.
Whatever.
I was not able to get that great why answer from Clarence Thomas, who also wrote again.
The suddenly very vocal Clarence Thomas, who went like 20 years without writing anything. Now every single decision he writes something, pretty much, almost.
And he wrote, that is, powers related to electors reside with states to the extent that the Constitution does not remove or restrict that power. Thus, to invalidate a state law, there must be something in the federal Constitution that deprives the states of the power to enact such a measure. So basically what he's doing here is he's going to the 10th Amendment and saying, look, this is on the states. They can do this. Now, if more of the Supreme Court would go to the 10th Amendment more often, we may not have this show.
We'd have a smaller government. Yeah, if the states were if the federal government was limited to its enumerated powers, like really limited to its enumerated powers, we'd have a much smaller government. Unfortunately, we have a government that the Supreme Court routinely says that kind of sounds like commerce. So yeah, they can limit that. They can control
Right.
that. But that's not commerce meant goods and services traded across state lines. That was it. And when it said regulate, back then the term regulate meant make more regular, allow it to flow freely. Regulate didn't mean what they've turned regulate to mean
Right. What
now, which is
regulated means
control.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yes.
Now, of course, the court's opinion does not extend to every scenario that could pop up. And in her opinion, Kagan listed a few.
Okay.
She said, if the winning presidential candidate dies after election day, but before the Electoral College casts its votes, states can't necessarily force electors to cast ballots for a dead person.
Okay.
So situations like that. She also wrote that the state restrictions on electors couldn't violate the Equal Protection Clause or impose additional qualifications for presidential candidates. And even though she didn't like say anything, she didn't go into depth on that. California recently had a case that was shut down by SCOTUS, saying that all POTUS candidates had to release their tax returns. All that is required is 35 years old, born in America. I think that's it, right?
35 years old, born in America, natural born citizen, and you have to have resided here for at least the last 7 years, I believe.
Yeah,
something like that. And it's to prevent, the fun fact that was added because the greatest concern at that time when the revolution happened and then when the Constitution was added, the most popular person in the U.S. was the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the Anglican Church. And there was some serious concern that people would elect the head of the Anglican Church, which would essentially bring America back into the fold of the British Crown. And so they introduced that, saying that they had to actually live in the U. Had to be born in the U.S. And had to live here for 7 years. And then also they have to be 35. So that's the only restrictions that can be put on for someone to qualify to run for president.
Right. So when California says all presidential candidates to be on the ballot need to release their tax returns, they can't do that.
They can't say that, right? Exactly.
They cannot say that. So everybody is assuming I didn't put this in the notes, but she was making a lot of pop culture references, which when I think of Justice Kagan, I'm not thinking somebody who can make pop culture references. And she put it in the opinion. And they were well placed.
Did she reference Kanye West running for president?
This was before. Actually, well, I don't know when she wrote the opinion. It was released on Monday. So I'm assuming she wasn't working. She wasn't last minute writing the opinion Saturday night. But she did reference the show Hamilton. And she referenced, I don't remember the other thing. She referenced some other show.
That's unfortunate. We referenced Juice WRLD.
Yes, we did.
But I'm also not in the Supreme Court. Which is a key difference.
You make pop culture references a lot. Well, I do.
And I go, oh. Follow me on TikTok at literally Spike Cohen.
So that should bring it into the national popular vote interstate compact, because I can't see how it can continue.
I don't see how it can continue either. And again, I've always thought
I didn't see how it could continue before that, but
I think it's always been on incredibly shaky ground because, again, the Constitution says that the states can't create a compact, can't create an agreement between them that without involving the federal government, because ultimately what could happen then is that you could have the states create their own little interstate agreements that not all states would be included and would be an end run around the constitutional process, which is what this is. The whole purpose of the interstate compact is to create a compact inter the states, between the states, bypassing the constitutional process.
Right.
And you're not supposed to be able to do that. Whether you support the national popular vote, whether you support keeping the Electoral College in place, whether you support some other system, ranked choice voting, whatever, this is the way you're supposed to go through it.